Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back. We got a ton to do today. Really excited for our next guest coming up in the next segment, Brandon Weichert. The guy's super smart. We're going to break down how Trump does have a plan with Iraq. There's a purpose behind all of this, and I think it is all going to be for the best. I want to start off with this clip here. This is former Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters. He used to be on Fox News all the time, but he left like a year or so ago, and he called Fox News a propaganda machine for Trump. I say that here because he's not a guy who's just in the tank for Trump. Whatever Trump does, he's gonna be his lapdog. Almost every appearance of Ralph Peters on CNN, particularly Anderson Cooper's show, he's super critical of Trump, except for the other day on this here.
I think it was absolutely the right decision. And I was actually very disappointed by the reaction from the other side of the aisle today, which seemed awfully petty. General Soleimani he was the ace of spades that our enemies in the Middle East had. Soleimani was a visionary strategist. I just cannot understand how people can be reluctant to see this guy go. And we've all heard a lot of hysteria today. We've heard, well, a replacement's already been named. Well, yes. But you can't replace Einstein with a high school science teacher, as much as I like high school science teachers. He may be impossible to replace. And as far as repercussions go, yes, there will be some. And you've also heard the question all day, well, are we safer now? No. But in the mid to long term, we may well be.
Very good. So it's not going to be World War III. And it's so funny looking back, whenever the strike happened. I mean, what day is it? Where are we? Today, Tuesday? So the strike happened like Wednesday or Saturday or something. I remember right away the next day, all this World War III talk, all this talk about drafts and everything. Everyone just got this super emotional about it. And you look back at that and you're like, oh, geez, guys. I'm talking to me, like, don't get wrapped up in that. It's not going to lead to World War III. Far from that, I think it's going to lead to less war, less tension. And also, as our guest yesterday, Mike Baker said, it wasn't done on a whim, and it wasn't done with no plan in place for what's next. But everything's got to be partisan all the time, right? New poll came out this morning, and it's all party line if you support what Trump did or not, based on what party, right? I want to give another example of this partisanship, which is so annoying with something like this, because this is far too important. We're talking about people's lives on the line, right? But the partisanship is so strong. This is Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, new Prime Minister of England. We were told this guy was an idiot, and here he is reciting a portion of the Iliad in Greek.
The greatest classics of every reference, such as the Iliad, and that is what I do. When I'm in trouble, I recite to myself, Main and Aedithea, Peleia, Jo, Achilleos, Ulomenain, Homoria, Kaios, Algiatheke, Palastiftimus, Psukas, Aedi, Proeapsin, Hero, now tuste Hiloria, Teucikunestin, Oionosi de Passi, Diostieteleto, Bule, Exhude ta prota, Diestatene risante, Atreides Hianaxandron kai Dios, Achilles. Letus kai Dios huios, Hoga Basilei Colothes, Nusonana straton Orsticacane, Ole conto de laoi, Hunecaton crucein, Atimase naretera, Atreides. Ho! Ga! Elthithoase Pineas Achaon. Lusomenosti Thugatra, Feron Taparesia Poina, Skeptra Teconen Cursin, Hekibolo Apollonos.
He goes on for like another 2 minutes. So I think that's very impressive. I think it's very impressive. Now, how do people respond to this? How do people react to this? It turns out there's a direct correlation between if you're impressed with that and if you like Boris Johnson, the politician. More specifically, there's a direct correlation between if you're impressed with what he just did and if you support Brexit. If you like Boris Johnson, then you're impressed with that. If you don't like Boris Johnson, then, oh, he mispronounced a word. What an idiot. He skipped a part. I heard someone on Twitter, like, I'm a classics major, and he missed a line. Like, oh, are you kidding me? One argument was, oh, that's just some dumb party trick. Anyone can do that. That's a dumb party trick. Come on. And it's because they hate him. So no matter what he did, what he does, even something that's objectively impressive, like, oh, it's stupid, that's dumb. Same thing with Trump. If Trump tomorrow recited the Iliad in original Greek, imagine if Trump gives a speech tomorrow and he's like, listen, I did this strike in Iran because, well, I'm reminded of this part from the Iliad. And he just quotes it in Greek, right? Right? If he did that, get ready for all the think pieces about how Homer was a racist and white supremacists love the Iliad, and that was a dog whistle to white supremacists. And we got to take The Simpsons off the air because the name Homer is now very triggering because Trump dare recite the Iliad in original Greek. It is amazing what Trump can get the left to do. Trump is getting the left now to defend the Ayatollah. Now, some people, Jesse Kelly had a funny tweet the other day about we throw a couple bombs and all of a sudden Iran's become a great vacation destination to the left. Some people are able to see through this. Guys like Ralph Peters. And say, come on, guys. Come on. If Obama did this, order this strike, then it would be the greatest tactical move, the bravest decision by a commander-in-chief in world history. Nobel Peace Prize worthy. Instead, Trump did it, and he's evil, and it's terrible, and it's going to lead to World War III. Now, was it a good move? I don't know. Too early to say, right? I think so. I think it was good. This is Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw, congressman, such an important voice in our country. I really look forward to his future and him getting more attention, having more influence. And it's wild. It's funny how history works. The only reason people even know this guy really, I think, is because of that Pete Davidson Saturday Night Live joke where he made fun of his eye patch. And then he got all this attention and he was prepared for it. He's a smart guy and a former Navy SEAL. Anyway, here he is on MSNBC, and he's been very critical of the president for different things, but he's been supportive of the president's decision with Iran. Here he is.
Of course, I understand the cost of war. I've lived it. I've deployed to Iraq twice. I will say I did not join the SEAL team so that I could remain safe. I joined the SEAL team so that I could keep the American people safe, and I still view that as the role of the military. I view this as a good day for America. We've rid ourselves of one of the world's most preeminent terrorists. He runs the IRGC Quds Force. This organization is responsible for actually not countless American deaths. We can actually count them. Over 600 American deaths in Iraq because they exported specialized IEDs to Iraq. The Quds Force was obviously, he orchestrated the recent attack on our embassy. Before that, the indirect rocket attacks against our base. The takedown of American drones. Before that, seizing oil tankers. Before that, attacking Saudi oil facilities. So there's been a long escalation that has occurred, and we have to ask ourselves, how long will we let that happen? When are we going to disrupt the escalation ladder that Soleimani was creating and force them to recalculate their escalation against us?
So again, Crenshaw has been critical of Trump many times in the past, so he's not a lapdog by any means. But his point is that Soleimani was the one who was escalating tensions. Stop with this impression that the Middle East was some sort of peaceful, lovable, wonderful place to be until Trump, for no reason at all, went in and just screwed things up. Come on. They've been at war with us for decades. This place is a mess. And the goal is to draw a few lines in the sand and then back them up. And I guarantee you that the leaders of Iran respect Trump for it. I don't hear that a lot either. You don't hear people talk about that. They don't like it, obviously. No one wants missiles to come kill their top commander. They don't like it, but they respect him. My point of this segment is, as we have our next guest coming up who's super smart on all this stuff and is going to outline all the major big picture geopolitical aspects of this and how Russia and China is responding and reacting to all this, the message that it sends to them, what he thinks Iran's going to do, all that stuff, all this big picture stuff. Let's assess all of it on its own merit, not based on any infatuation with Trump or deep-seated hatred of Trump. It's way too important to let emotions rule. Got our guest coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, fired up for our next guest, Brandon Weichert. He writes out Real Clear, American Greatness, The American Spectator. He's got a new book coming out this year, Winning Space, How America Remains a Superpower. Brandon Weichert. Mr. Weichert, how are you, sir?
Very well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Really good, and I love your most recent article you wrote, and I want to break it down in more detail here. The very first sentence, President Donald Trump likely has averted a major regional war. So that is the exact opposite of every single thing we've been hearing this last week, where he's leading us to a war. People are worried we're going to have a draft, and this whole. Why do you feel the opposite of what everyone's saying?
Well, generally speaking, I do think we're closer to a great power war, but I don't think it's going to be over this issue. I think that Iran is far too weak. And I really don't think that what Trump did amounts to the initiation of a war. I think more probably what's going to happen is that Trump is going to be maneuvering our forces out of Iraq, or he wants to at least, and repositioning them to areas of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and other bases in the region, and that will ameliorate the tensions right now. Already we're seeing, apparently there was an article that came out this morning, I think at Axios, they were announcing that the foreign minister of Iran has already reached out to the Israelis to try to get a back channel going to start negotiating with the U.S. And so I'm not convinced that this was about escalating a war with Iran. I think what this was about was Trump sending a message. If you try to hit our people, we're going to hit you twice as hard. Trump's a counterpuncher. That's what he does. Look at how he handled Rosie O'Donnell. That's a great example of the way that he will handle a situation. I think he's just covering the exits right now as we leave.
Okay, there's a lot there. I want to get back to the counterpunching, but so it sounds like you believe there's a plan, because it's another thing we're hearing is that just one day he decided to drop a bomb on a guy, and now we're scrambling to figure out what to do. But you think there is a bigger purpose and plan when it comes to troop realignment. Can you explain that?
Well, the president, we know from reportage that the president actually had long, detailed discussions with commanders at CENTCOM. He had detailed discussions with the DOD before he did this. This wasn't just Trump waking up and being the mad bomber. I mean, that's a lie in the media. Whether it's part of a concerted strategy, I don't know, but I do know that the president has been very consistent in his desire to avoid another Mideast war. And we saw this with the Syria bombings a couple years ago. Everybody said, oh my gosh, this is the end. This is where another war starts. And he managed to avoid getting us into a major war there while still protecting U.S. national interests, mainly fighting ISIS, keeping Iran back. Something similar, I think, is at play here. And I think that the Iraqi parliament recently voted to kick us out of the country. And so we're in a position now where we either keep our troops there in force, which is not good, because then they become a target, or we simply reposition 5,000 of our people out of Iraq into neighboring Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. It's not that big of a deal, basically, is what I'm thinking.
Let's talk about that Iraqi parliament vote, because I've been hearing different things about what it was and who even showed up.
Right.
So can you break that down a little more?
Yeah, and as I say in the article, basically it was along ethnic and religious lines. It was mostly the Shiites who showed up. The Shiites control the Iraqi parliament because they're the majority population of Iraq. And basically they showed up to vote to kick the U.S. forces out because their neighbors, Iran, is a Shiite power, and most of the people in Iraq's government are beholden to Iran. The people who did not show up are traditional U.S. allies over in Iraqi Kurdistan. Their representatives didn't vote, as well as the Sunni Iraqis, who we are not necessarily friendly with, but who definitely don't want to see Iraq become a colony, basically, of Iran because of the Sunni Shiite religious war that's going on. And so really, it was a majority vote still, because the Shiites have the control, but it was by no means a sort of plurality. You did not have representatives from the other two major groups in Iraq voting.
Yeah, so what do we do? What do we do with that? How are we supposed to interpret that?
Well, the DoD, I think there's kind of a battle going on within the Pentagon right now. You've got people who say, "Look, we've invested in Iraq. We need to stay there." Obviously, the Shiites don't want us there because of their connection to Iran. The government, at least, of Iraq doesn't want us there. But the Kurds are fine with us. The Sunnis probably would be fine with us because they don't want the Iranians coming in. Maybe we should stay. My personal view is that the president's instincts are right. We punched Iran in the nose by killing Soleimani, broke their nose. He was a key player for their war effort in the region. You remove him, it's like killing Yamamoto in World War II. Yeah, they'll be able to keep fighting, but you've lost a really smart guy and a really capable leader who had vision. And so that gives us time to reposition into parts of the Middle East that are more friendly to our forces. Kuwait and shockingly Saudi Arabia are more friendly right now than Iraq is. And that should be where we're going. And it's not going to impact our little Cold War with Iran at all, because we'll still be in the region and we still have air dominance and we still have dominance at sea. So this doesn't need to be that big of a deal.
So you mentioned 5,000 troops. So I'm surprised that it's that few. I would have guessed there's a lot more of our guys in Iraq, especially considering we have a $750 million embassy that was like the biggest embassy in the world times 10.
Right. So I'm talking about the 5,200 officially acknowledged U.S. troops that are. The DoD officially says that's the number. There are a lot of embassy personnel, as we saw with the attacks on the embassy. But ultimately, I think it's probably the forces that they're talking about are on the bases, which is about 5,200. And so we need to probably reorient them in order to avoid a major crisis in Iraq.
Interesting. So, that's so interesting. So how would you characterize this as like abandoning our bases or leaving our, like, how would you characterize that, and why does Trump want that / why is that good for America? Because I'm inclined to believe it is, but I want to be able to define that.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily good. I think it's probably the least worst option. There are no good options here. The government of Iraq that we installed has asked us to leave. And so we are in the unfortunate position of we either stay against the wishes of the government, and that causes all kinds of problems for us, knock-on effects, or we simply rejigger our forces so that they're in neighboring countries and at sea. We still are able to protect our interests, but at the same time, we do avoid a direct confrontation with Iran, which I think is probably in the U.S. best interest to not have a direct fight with Iran. Once the Iranian forces move in, because basically they want to use Iraq as a land bridge to Syria and Lebanon and Israel. Once the Iraqis basically get us out, the Iranians are going to try to take Iraq. The problem is you've got a large Sunni population that does not want Iranian control. So if we go, we will still be able to lend support covertly to the forces in Iraq that don't want the Iranians there. And as long as we can complicate Iranian grand design for the region while minimizing our risk, I think that's a win in the long term. And I think that President Trump recognizes we simply can't afford a great power war right now in the Middle East with Iran, and it would be a very bloody affair.
I think that's all so good. So back it up a little bit. Why are you surprised that Iran, I know we're only a couple days after we killed the guy, but are you surprised that they haven't reacted more, or that they're not doing more, or why do you think because you mentioned they opened up a back channel with Israel now.
That's
right?
what I read this morning on Axios. I don't know if it's true. That's what Axios was, one of their little blurbs that I just saw before I came on. So, take that how you want, but I can see that happening because we know that not all of the Iranian leadership thinks going to war with the U.S. is a good idea. My understanding is, I think 4 or 5 months ago, when Mike Pompeo was visiting Germany, he had a sudden departure and flew into Baghdad randomly. Well, what I was told by people in the region is that that's because the Iranian foreign minister had made a secret trip to Baghdad and was trying to open up a back channel with the U.S. to try to ratchet down tensions. But the Ayatollah said, no, don't. And so, this is a lot of hearsay, a lot of sort of, backroom talk that I'm hearing from people that I know. that I can't verify some of it, but it does seem to keep in line with a lot of what the Iranians have done. They like putting on a big show, but ultimately, as they say in the South, they're all flash and no photo, and I think that's a lot of what's going on. Is they know they ultimately, what can they do? Because we may be the great Satan, but the great Satan has a lot of capabilities that if you really pushed us, we can probably pancake Iran, and they know that.
And well, now we have a president who would,
And
or they showed he would.
is that he's punched them in the nose, and he's sending signals to them and North Korea and anyone else. I'm going to mess you up if you make us look bad, or if you kill our people. It's just not gonna fly.
Yeah, that's so important. I want to ask you about that. So let's talk about some countries that have photo, not just flash. What message does this send to China and Russia and to North Korea to an extent? How do you think they're going to respond because of what Trump did?
Well, remember, over Christmas, Kim Jong-un promised us he was going to give us a gift, and which usually means nuclear weapons, something with nukes. Then on January 1st, he promised us in his New Year's speech that he was resuming completely the nuclear tests and everything. It's been pretty muted the last few days, and I think that's directly because you can't predict Trump. He's not a predictable politician. Russia's been fairly quiet, considering that this Iran is one of their proxies. You would think they would have at least done something to symbolize that, hey, we don't approve of this. Now they've issued an official statement saying they don't approve of it, but anybody can do that. That doesn't mean anything. And then the Chinese, they're keeping pretty quiet too. I mean, even in Hong Kong, they're still pressing the protesters in Hong Kong, but a lot of that's quieted down. And I think a lot of that is because they don't know exactly what Trump might do. And unpredictability, despite what the experts say, is Trump's best asset. And at the end of the day, Trump, though, is not like George W. Bush. He's not going to overreact and invade a whole region. What he's going to do is be a belligerent foreign policy minimalist. So, and if you keep that in mind, it sort of kind of explains a lot of his behavior. And it's all good because the bad guys don't know if America's coming to pound the door down or if we're just putting on a show. And that's good.
All right, hold on. I'm writing that down. Belligerent foreign policy minimalist. Gosh, that's good. I like that. That seems to me, if I'm coming at it from the perspective of the Iranians and these other people, that seems to me to be a position of strength, right? And I'm thinking back of old Trump's like art of the deal type stuff, just in business negotiations. Like, I feel like that's been his MO his entire business career.
Right, and it's pretty interesting to me because I do know that when he was elected, everyone around the world started buying the art of the deal again, and particularly foreign intelligence agents, because they were trying to figure out what's going to make this guy tick. It's strange to me that it doesn't seem yet that foreign leaders have figured out Trump. I mean, it's very clear he's going to keep pushing, as he said in the book. He'll keep pushing and raising the stakes, but ultimately he has probably a lower threshold for what he really wants, but he's going to keep pushing you to see if he can maximize his gain. It's actually a very Russian way of negotiating, which is why I think actually the Russians try to negotiate with him, because he understands that mentality, that sort of old world mentality of negotiation. It's something that U.S. elites in Washington, D.C. just don't know how to do.
Wow. All right, Brandon, I got one last question for you. You've been awesome. I hope we can talk again. So our last segment, we played the clip of Boris Johnson. I don't know if you saw this over Christmas, where he recited a couple minutes of the Iliad in original Greek, and which is awesome, right? Especially because we were told such an idiot. But whether or not you found that impressive was a direct correlation between whether or not you supported Brexit. Right. So if you hated Boris Johnson, then that was a stupid thing and he missed a couple words. And if you love Boris Johnson, then that was the most brilliant thing you've ever seen in your whole life.
Yeah,
I've seen the same thing happening here, right? If you hate Trump, then this is the worst thing ever. If you love Trump, then blah, blah. How do you account for that, and how do you suggest we get past that? Because this is too important to just put our silly political lens on it.
Well, ultimately, Trump's the president. And so ultimately, he's going to make the decision, and, he's in the room. And so people are going to have their opinion. They always do. it really doesn't matter. The president has wide authority on foreign policy. This has been, reaffirmed time and again. I hear burblings from Congress that they're going to suddenly reassert their power again after decades of having no desire to influence foreign policy. Who knows if that's going to happen? They can't even seem to figure out if they're going to file articles of impeachment with the Senate or not. So ultimately, I think that we're going to have a debate, as always. It's going to be between typical partisan lines, but ultimately Trump's going to make the decision. And ultimately, I think the reason you had that memo being leaked yesterday saying that we were pulling out, I think because there's a battle right now going on in the Pentagon between those who want us to stay in Iraq and those who want us to reposition. And I think ultimately the president's instincts are going to be, we're going to reposition, because that's what he campaigned on. And that is going into a re-election. He's got to maintain some semblance of that promise.
Yeah, really good. Brandon Weichert, he's at Real Clear, American Spectator, American Greatness, and the new book coming out about space, winning space, how America remains a superpower. I definitely want to talk about that as we get a little closer to the release. Brandon, really good to talk to you, brother. Hope we can do it again.
Thank you. God bless. Have a good day.
That is superb. Belligerent foreign policy minimalist. That is awesome. All right, coming up, we're going to change gears. We're going to talk about Ricky Gervais and the Golden Globes. Next, True Story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, glad you're here. We're going to change gears a little bit here. We got to talk about Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes. First, in a beautiful metaphor, a sewage pipe burst and flooded the red carpet for the show. That's amazing. That's awesome. So, I like Ricky Gervais a lot. I think his stand-ups are brilliant. You got to watch them all. He is a flaming atheist. So I disagree with him on that, but I love his performance, and there's many things we do agree on. He's vehemently free speech and against all this PC nonsense, particularly about all this gender stuff and transgenderism and all that. So host of the Golden Globes, and his attitude was, hey, this is my 5th time doing it. I don't care what I say, which is a bit because he did the same thing in 2012 when he hosted. He's like, it's the last time I'm going to do this. I don't really care what I say. But it's fine. It works. He had this great line before the show. He said, do I pander to the 200 privileged egos in the room? Or do I try and entertain a global audience of 200 million people sitting at home who aren't winning awards? Well, no contest. I try and make it a spectator sport. I've got to be the bloke sitting at home who shouldn't have been invited. That's who I got to be. Oh, I love that imagery so much. He's not one of them. He's the guy sitting at home who shouldn't have been invited but got an invite by accident and instead is able to get there and just blow the whole thing up. Gosh, that's brilliant. And he just ripped on these celebrity clowns like no other. And it was beautiful and wonderfully awkward. And the cameras panned on the celebrities in the audience, and they were all dead-faced, so uncomfortable, and it made me happy. Now, you've heard all the jokes by now, so we're not going to play them all, but I want to play 2. So this is the last joke of his monologue.
Apple roared into the TV game with a morning show, a superb drama, a superb drama about the importance of dignity and doing the right thing, made by a company that runs sweatshops in China. So, well, you say you're woke, but the companies you work for, I mean, unbelievable. Apple, Amazon, Disney. If ISIS started a streaming service, you'd call your agent, wouldn't you? So, if you do win an award tonight, don't use it as a platform to make a political speech, right? You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world. Most of you spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg.
That's so good. But then they all went on to go make political speeches. He says, don't use your award as a platform to make a political speech. You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world. Again, he's speaking as the bloke at home who shouldn't have gotten invited. You know nothing about the real world. I do, you don't. And by the way, Ricky Gervais actually does. He didn't get famous until he was in his 40s. And then there was someone asked him, could I think he asked his wife, or not his girlfriend for 30 years, could I have been famous earlier? Could I have made it earlier? And his girlfriend said, no. You needed to live life first. You needed to work that boring office job so that you could go then make the show about having a boring office job. You needed to be that bloke at home who shouldn't have got invited before you could have been Ricky Gervais up on stage making fun of everyone in the audience there. So he says to all these people here, you know nothing about the real world, and then lacking complete awareness, Michelle Williams wins an award for something, I don't know, and she gives this absurd statement in favor of abortion while she's pregnant. That is unfathomable to me. I don't want to go into a whole abortion thing, but the fact that you can feel a human kicking inside of you, and then you can say, hey, everyone, you should be allowed to kill this thing if you want. Your choice. Now, I chose not to have the kid last time, and thank goodness, because, you know, my career. But also, thank goodness my mom chose to give birth to me because, you know, my career. But either way, if you want to do this, then you should feel free. Good night, everybody. It's like, what do you... The host of the show just said no one cares about your views on politics or culture. And the flaming narcissists who are the sewage pit of our culture couldn't help but spout their views on politics and culture. And on Ricky Gervais's point, Michelle Williams dropped out of school at 15. You couldn't have scripted any better. There's an actress who gives her views on politics and culture who has spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg. He couldn't have written that any better. Now, the LA Times TV critic, she wrote on Twitter, she said, you know, the Golden Globes' mood was already sober, thanks to an impeachment, threat of war with Iran, and Australian bushfires. Sorry, it's serious, it's serious. The last thing anyone needed was Ricky Gervais there telling them they sucked. Wow. She's right. I hope they're okay. I'm sorry, I've been rude. I've been celebrating other people not feeling the hurt feelings. And I really hope all these celebrities are feeling okay after what Ricky Gervais did to them. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't aware of how broke up they all are about fires in Australia. And I'm sure the impeachment was really weighing heavy on the minds of those celebrities there. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio especially has been really broke up about Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5 of the Constitution. That's, of course, the impeachment powers of the Congress. And he was on a boat in Monaco the other day, and the 10 models who were there, they said he just didn't seem quite like himself. Leonardo DiCaprio just hasn't been himself lately. And then Ricky Gervais just comes in and is mean. You're right. It was really inappropriate. I'm on the celebrity side now. I didn't realize how emotionally wounded they were going into the night. And then Ricky Gervais caps off the night with this gem.
It's all ready. Right, last one. Come on, guys. Our next presenter starred in Netflix's Bird Box, a movie where people survive by acting like they don't see a thing. Sort of like working for Harvey Weinstein. You did it. I didn't. You did it. Please welcome Sandra Bullock.
Absolute gold. True story. Mike Slater, more coming up. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to take Ricky Gervais's hosting of the Golden Globes the other day. I want to take it back a notch and talk more big picture about comedy in general and the importance of what Ricky Gervais did yesterday. First, this is a clip of Jerry Seinfeld winning an award back in 2007 while knocking all award shows. Here's what he said.
Actors and, I don't know why we're so fascinated with actors. in this culture. They haven't got a thought in their stupid bedhead, hairdo, mini brains. Why? We must honor this man. Why? He pretended to be Bob Johnson. He's a genius, I tell you. It's genius what he's doing. Playing dress up and pretend is not genius, ladies and gentlemen. It's not genius. Roll the cameras, put on these clothes, stand there, ready, say what we told you to say. Fantastic. He did it. Give this man a huge golden trophy. He's a goddamn genius. Walking down the red carpet in these ridiculous outfits like they're senators from Krypton. It's just so stupid.
The clip we played in the last segment, Ricky Gervais's last joke of the monologue when he was talking about Apple, the camera and how Apple uses sweatshop labor around the world, and you guys are so woke and you work for Apple and stuff. The cameras were panned on Tim Cook. That was Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. Has Tim Cook ever felt more uncomfortable in his entire life than that moment right there? Now, I almost feel a little bad for Tim Cook because he's not a celebrity, right? I don't think he's as self-righteous as these other celebrities, although maybe. I'm not sure he deserves a roasting as much as the Hollywood people. But the boldness of Ricky Gervais to say those things to their face, that's what's magical, and that's what's so important. And Peter Hasson hit it the other day. He said, Ricky Gervais's speech is a reminder of the important role that comedians play. Here it is. Ridiculing those who believe themselves above ridicule. Let me say, and that's so important. Ridiculing those. This is the role that comedians play. This is why they're so important. They ridicule those who believe themselves above ridicule. This is why comedy matters. This is also why corrupt regimes don't allow comedy. Saudi Arabia made Netflix pull a stand-up special by Hassan Minhaj because it criticized Saudi Arabia. They know, the leaders of Saudi Arabia know how much of a threat comedy is to their power, and they won't allow it. Quick sidebar. Yesterday, we talked to Claudia Rosset, and I asked her what, of all the corrupt regimes, is what she specializes in. I said, of all the corrupt regimes in the world, I said, what do they all have in common? And she said, if you remember, she said the thing they have in common is that they export their ideology around the world. And she said that, and I thought, well, so do we. And then she said something like, yeah, but ours is morally, objectively good. And I remember I heard that, and I said, even I, the great defender of truth and virtue, even I fell for the moral relativism that I've been fed since grade school, which is, well, you know, who are we to say that our culture's good? All cultures are great, except America. We're bad, and it's bad that we're exporting our bad culture. It's good that other countries export their culture, but our culture's bad, and we shouldn't. But I fell for that for a second. I had to snap out of it. I bet if you go back and you watch the interview, you can see me kind of, and then I literally have to snap out of it for a second. And then she made the rock-solid argument of, where are people migrating? Where do people choose to go when they have the choice? Are people going to Iran? Of course not. Are people going to North Korea, to China, Russia? No, they're moving to Western countries. I found an article the other day. I'm probably going to share it tomorrow, definitely this week. It's written by a man from Lebanon. He lives in America now, loves America. His cousin lives in Syria. And he found a quote from his cousin in the local newspaper in Syria about the great Satan, about America and how horrible we are, blah, blah, blah. And the guy who's now in America, he saw that and he said, well, hold on. I know my cousin. And I know that my cousin dreams of coming to America one day. And I know he dreams of living in a Western country. And his whole article, which again we'll talk about later, is why. He's like, why would my cousin do that? And he had a great line. He says, it reflects the double-faced character that most of the Arabs and Muslims have to put up, fearing the tyranny that they live under. Fearing the tyranny they live under. And one of the tyrannies they live under is lack of free speech and lack of comedy. Real comedy. Comedy that goes after power. Comedy that goes after our leaders. It's amazing to me the people in America who defend Iran and criticize our president and criticize America, when if you lived in Iran and you criticize their president, the Ayatollah, they'd kill you. And I'm not saying don't criticize America. That's not my point. I just wish the people who criticize America, that's actually the opposite of my point. I wish the people who criticize America and criticize our president had a split second of appreciation for the fact that they can safely do that here. Remember a couple weeks ago, we talked to Heather McDonald. She had this great line in an article of hers, and I read it and I said, oh, we gotta talk to her, we gotta have her on. And she said that social justice crusaders are stripping the future of everything that matters or everything that gives life meaning. Beauty, sublimity, and wit. And I asked her about each of those words, and those are obviously very specifically chosen, beauty, sublimity, and wit. Very interesting words. And I remember she said beauty for its own sake. And sublimity, she defined sublime as basically things bigger than yourself, which is the antidote to narcissism, right? We live in a very narcissistic culture, so to fight that, we need things bigger than ourselves. And then I asked her about wit, because I thought that was such a funny, what do you mean by wit? Here's what she said.
I think comedy is the greatest accomplishment of human beings, and
Wow.
The evidence is there's very few of them. You know, if you look at the literature or the operatic literature, the ratio of comedies to tragedy is like 1 to 100. It's incredible. Tragedy is very easy. You get some melodramatic deaths and, you know, but comedy, to turn it for human beings to satirize their own foibles, to distance themselves from it, which comedy requires, and to look at the self with a lack of maudlin victimology, to farce is a fantastic creation. That to me defines the best of human beings.
That's so good. So she said that comedy is the most difficult, and I would argue comedy is the most important form of art. That's why what Ricky Gervais did the other day is so important, because it's the ultimate arrow to pierce ourselves and our society, and I think maybe more importantly, our betters, right? Be it they celebrities or politicians. And it's the ultimate weapon. When wielded well, it's the ultimate weapon at power. This is why it's good to have late night shows. Late night show hosts mock the president. It's good for it's part of a healthy society. The White House Correspondents' Dinner, it was a good thing when you have a comedian mock the president who's sitting right next to them. I don't know if they do this every year or not, but I know on big presidential elections years, they have this big white collar dinner or white tie dinner in New York City. It's like the Owl something dinner or whatever, and it's a big thing. And they have the main guy in the front, and they have the two presidential candidates. You may remember Hillary and Trump doing this. They stand next to each other, and they each do a little stand-up routine about themselves and about the other candidate, and it's all done in good nature, and it's fun. It's good. That's a really, really good thing when done well. Now it's been abused. Now it's purely partisan. It's just hackery, and there's no attempt at humor. I saw this ad the other day. I got this on my Twitter feed. This is an ad for a comedian on Amazon Prime. She has a stand-up special on Amazon Prime, and the headline was, Alana Glazer speaks the truth in her new comedy special. And here was the ad that they chose to play for me to try and convince me to watch her comedy special.
So the government is on fire, and so is the planet. The planet is on fire, and the mean dinosaurs in office just don't seem to mind. No. I think they want us to die because they're about to die. That is the ultimate FOMO.
What was that? That was the comedy special? In our progressive world, where everything is relative, where the modern anything's goal is to destroy that thing, right? Modern art, the goal of modern art, purposefully, intentionally, is to destroy the very concept of art. Modern music destroys music. Modern families destroy the family, the nuclear family. Modern education systems destroy education. Same thing here. Modern comedy, which I guess is what that was, and what regrettably things like Stephen Colbert are and what The Daily Show is today. This modern comedy, it destroys comedy. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about real comedy, what Gervais did yesterday. We need to always protect comedians from censure, from free speech laws, even and especially if it's being done against our team. We need to defend actual comedy as opposed to activism wrapped up in some sort of guise of comedy. This has been True Story with Mike Slater. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day. Spread the word.